Good evening, guys. We all understand the fact that money doesn't really disappear unless it is removed or added by the bank in charge, like the Federal Reserve or the Bank of England. Money does not disappear, right? It changes hands. The average individual legally does not have the means to print money, right? So money is always changing hands. Now, the cost of living crisis that we're seeing here in the UK and seemingly across a lot of Western Europe and the US as well, or a lot of Western countries generally, we're talking about how the average person is getting poorer or struggling more. Who is benefiting from it? Well, you know what? This is actually really easy to find out. And to acknowledge this, we only have to acknowledge where the money is going. Now, you see, the term inflation is a term which absolves everybody of any guilt or responsibility. If I said that, what would have been £50 is now worth 20, and I say the reason is because I've stolen 30 of it, you're going to probably hate me. You're probably going to feel a certain sort of way. Fairly, right? I think that's completely fair. Now, if I told you the reason for it is because of inflation, oh, well, that's fair enough. But that's not necessarily always the case. Now, of course, in certain categories, that's fair, but let's talk across the board. Some things generally have gone up in price or value due to a lot of different circumstances in the world, but let's think about this, yeah? So, inflation is not hurtful to everybody in every way, and that's the first thing to acknowledge. I gave an example in a former video that I just filmed of property inflation. Now, you hear property inflation and you think, if you're not a homeowner, oh no, properties have gone up by 20%, it's property inflation. Who is actually benefiting from this? Property owners. Landlords, which, if it's people who've worked hard their whole life and they've bought a house, fair play, but also the big companies who own multiple hundreds, if not thousands of properties are benefiting massively. We hear fuel price inflation, and I'm sure that some costs associated have gone up with importing fuels and that sort of stuff, but realistically, why are a lot of fuel companies, petrol stations, making record profits? You see, that's what inflation in a lot of means is, because to my understanding at least, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm going to get called out in the comment section and roasted, but I've always believed that inflation is meant to be a substantiated calculation of how much certain prices have risen, and it's based on a few different things. So it means that prices have risen, and that's what causes inflation. So we look across the board, and pick a company, pick any company that you like, at all, or even just search into Google record profits and see who's benefiting from inflation. Seriously have a look. A lot of companies in the UK, a lot of companies in the US, inflation, oh, I can't afford to put food on the table. What's the profit this year of Tesco's? What's the profit this year of Asda, of Sainsbury's, whatever, any place like this? Just an example. What is the profit? I'm just asking the question. I have looked it up, and I know that for a lot of these companies, it's supremely high. Oh, I can't afford to fill up the car. What money is Shell making this year? Just an example, right? Just an example. I'm not necessarily blaming or suggesting any company in particular, because this is not a deep dive in that way, but I'm just pointing what I believe to be a simple fact out. Somebody is benefiting from your misery, and that is, you might say it's dark, you might say it's sinister, and of course it is. In the truest sense, it is genuinely capitalism, and I think in a lot of ways we are maybe looking at what might be a capitalism endgame in a way, because capitalism, I believe, it initially was intended to benefit everyone, benefit the hard working, right? If I could go to work for, let's say, 60 hours a week and be, let's say 20 to 30% better off than my peers, that's great. That's hard work. That's merit in place. If I can't do that, or if most people can't do that, then we're kind of at the end game of capitalism. The top people own everything. The average person struggles to not only produce just for the top person, and also just to get by for themselves. And I don't mean in any kind of a luxurious way. So what is this? Is this the end game of capitalism? I don't know. But I just needed to make this point. So what can we do about this? How do we face this acknowledgement? Because for a lot of people, inflation is just an umbrella term that they pretend to care about, but they don't take any time to research, and it means genuinely nothing, bar the fact that, their money goes less far. How do we actually make inflation our friend or beat inflation? Well, that is a difficult question. But here's the thing, right? Just acknowledge inflation is seemingly a bit of an on purpose, right? And someone does benefit from it. And I can't acknowledge how important I think it is to acknowledge this fact. Someone is getting richer off of your misery. I would definitely think about this in everything that I did. And people don't necessarily understand how important this is going to be long term. It's like getting money sustainably, an extra income of maybe £100,000 is going to make that difference, because if inflation carries on at this rate, people who don't own assets, and in a lot of markets it already seems to be the case, like housing, people who don't own these assets are almost certainly never going to have a chance of owning them. And unless you're making inflation or beating inflation in terms of pay rises or income increases, you're not in a good position. And that's just the truth of the matter. So, perhaps a miserable fact to acknowledge, but something that I think we all need to actually pay more attention to, because when we don't do this, we miss out on a substantial fact. And that fact, I believe, is the fact that, people want us to believe that inflation's bad for everybody. No, it's not. It's not bad for everybody. And some people are getting very rich just off the prospect of inflation. And that's your misery, right? That's the extra hours that you're having to put in at work. It's the extra cutbacks that you're having to make in terms of your disposable income and costs. Somebody is actually benefiting from it, because money, and I'm going to make this video one that goes round to the start again. I want to finish this video towards the point that I literally just started on. Money does not disappear, right? Unless it's printed or removed from circulation, money does not disappear. And we're marketed it in a way where, oh, well, we're all hurting. It's just inflation. Inflation sounds very harmless, because inflation doesn't sound like greed. Inflation doesn't sound like profiteering. I'm not saying that all inflation is that. Some inflation, I believe, probably does naturally just occur. But a lot of this is people making a lot of profit. People are getting rich off of inflation. People are getting rich off of your hard work, richer than what you are. Of course, if you're an employee, this has always been the case. We all know this. But to the extent that it is now, I believe it's shocking, and I believe it's something that we should really take the time to understand, dig into, and realize, because it's not going to be pleasant going forwards. It's going to just get worse. So who do you want to be in the economy of the future, and what do you see from the future? Because in today's market, we're living at a point where unless you're making substantially above minimum wage and even an average wage, you are behind. Right? I don't know what that means for me. I'm not saying that I'm making significantly above. I don't know what it means for you. It means different things for us all. But it should mean something. Because that is a challenge, I think. And it's going to continue to be challenging for probably the rest of the near future. And I want to just finish that one there. But just have a think about it.